sometimes it's just about a little bit of knowledge going quite a long way. Anyway, good afternoon. My name is Bob Usher. I'm the content manager for LGFL. I used to teach in 2 London secondary schools. Before I joined LGFL, I oversee all of the teaching and learning and the curriculum aspect of LGFL. I've got my colleague Laura, learning resource consultant, in the audience this afternoon here as well. Both Laura and I were very privileged last year to be regional leads for the DFE EdTech Demonstrator Programme, which gave us unbelievable access to senior leaders in schools during, let's face it, a very difficult time and a time of need for those schools. And it was a real privilege to work with senior leaders and help understand where they were at with education technology and what role it really played in their schools. But, and it's quite a but, I am not an inclusion expert, and that's quite something to say coming to an event such as this and actually being a presenter. I am not an inclusion expert. I reckon if there's any experts in the room, that will be all of you. Surely you know the needs of your learners and the people that you care for and help support in their learning. But the 2015 CENMAC Code of Practice very, very clearly says that if you are a teacher and you're working with young people, you are definitely involved in SEND. So I hope this afternoon, from a non-expert perspective, I can share some helpful hints and tips, but also signpost some of the resources and the training that LGFL offers, because the thing about LGFL is that, for the avoidance of doubt, we are a charitable trust, not for profit, and we place great importance on our charitable objectives here. Tackling inequality, how about that for this afternoon? Keeping children safe online, enhancing well-being and energising teaching and learning. There are 4 things I want to cover quickly this afternoon. It is going to be a whistle-stop tour, everyone. I'm going to go at quite a pace just so that I can cover a bit of ground, but there are 4 different aspects that I'm going to cover here. Quick thing about access and basic technology that we all need to get going online. Then we're going to talk about, and I'm going to show some examples of universal design for learning. Then I'm going to briefly talk about the CPD that Laura and myself offer, and also what LGFL is as a community. Because I feel actually it's really, I feel part of a community today being here at this fantastic conference. So the first thing, just really, really quickly, I know it sounds obvious, but we need basic technology sometimes just to get online. And there are many, many schools that I visit and that are doing fantastically with technology. And part of why they're doing so well is because they've really sorted out access and they've got a good ratio. That's the thing, the ratio of devices to learners. And I'm not going to go through in detail here all of these different imaginative ways beyond standard school funding, but really good schools find a way. And crowdfunding, if you have never considered it, can be really, really powerful in a school community context. And local businesses, if you don't ask, you don't get. And I know it's tricky at the moment in the economy, but again, there are many, many stories of very, very generous local benefactors helping schools. The thing I just want to mention, actually on this, is, just to finish with, is the LFL Bridge The Divide scheme. This was not something that we previously did, but during the pandemic, when there was a desperate need to get devices into schools, and in many cases, you know how it was. As soon as they came into the schools, those laptops, whoosh, they were out into homes due to remote learning needs. But because of the scale of LGFL, we've got over 3,000 schools on our service. We can do aggregated procurement, and we were able to get high quality devices at a really, really good price. And actually, in the first round of our procurement, during the COVID remote learning phase, we actually sold 157,000 laptops, high quality, good specification, really, really helpful for schools. But I am not standing here as a box shifter this afternoon.
Sorry, that was on silent.
That's all right. I just wanted to say about Bridge the Divide, it's much, much more than just the devices. So our approach at LGFL is to be much more holistic in the support that we provide. So, for example, we can help out with guidance on recycling. If schools want to structure their funding, or rather expenditure in different ways, we can offer leasing programs. But the kinds of things that myself and Laura are involved in are also helping teachers think about what is the point? Why would we use the technology? And someone else in the team, that's the third person, there's only 3 of us on the curriculum side of things, has produced a series of really, really short videos. Did you know this feature?
In this top tip, we're looking at enabling dictation mode. Microsoft loves speech recognition when it comes to Windows and Office. At any time, you can use the Win key and H combination to pop up a box that records your voice for your PC's microphone and dictates the speech into your current text field. It can help your students and yourself save time by dictating emails, messages and more. Fantastic inclusion support for your students, and it's just by hitting Win key and H.
Did you know that? I didn't know that, but that's what I mean about just tiny pieces of information can actually unlock that door for certain types of learners in certain types of situation. And the beauty of that is that's already built in. Do any of you ever use any Windows machines? Well, it works like that. So there's a whole series of those types of videos and those support. If you go to LFL Bridge The Divide, look for device support. Anyway, that was the quick first one on access. Now let's get into universal design for learning. And just by way of reassurance, if the next slide looks a bit complicated, don't worry, because what I see when I on my travels in schools is I see people doing these things without realising it. But I think it's helpful just to surface it and understand in a structured way how we approach making resources available. So in the first instance, from a teaching point of view, how do we engage with our learners? That's about how do we show the information. Representation, there are different ways of showing it, and then action and expression. How do we, and think of the context of today at our conference, what is our expectation on how a learner should respond, and how do we validate that response? Let's just go through with some examples here. This is taken from a resource called Space Adventures on LGFL, more on that in a moment. Basically, engagement would be things like use of video to convey information that might be linked to a piece of text. Might be virtual reality, might be augmented reality, and the text in the book could be an audio book. That's about engagement. Representation, quite similar to engagement, but this is where we get into, well, yes, you've got video, but does it have subtitles? Yes, we have text, but is it an easy read version text? Do we offer that, or do we expect all learners to be able to just cope the one set text? And what difference does it make if we have an easy read version? And hang on, how about a symbolised version? We've got widget here today, and there are other versions of symbolised systems as well. We have this on LJFL, that's something that isn't open access actually on there. But then this idea of action and expression, it is quite incredible nowadays of what you can do with technology, or rather, what many young learners have in their pocket, which in some schools is frowned upon as bad, must not be seen, must not be used, but incredible with what mobile phones can do. As teachers, what do we accept or expect in terms of how a learner might express themselves? Is it okay for a learner to express themselves through audio? Do they make a video, create an animation? Laura and I are involved in a whole project where we've got user-level augmented reality creation. And if you think that sounds like science fiction, it's very, very accessible, this platform here. This is a child that has put tiles on the ground in fake dust, in augmented reality, and you think, what has that got to do with anything? When you actually hear the child, it's not a video clip, this is just a photograph, and the child says, this is ancient Greece, and this I'm representing the Spartans, that were a warring nation, and this is where the military trained. And you think, what? That's really, you've been very creative with a piece of technology there to model the understanding. Works for some learners, doesn't work for some teachers if they think, well, I don't know how to do that, therefore I won't let my children do it. Two photographs from St Giles school in Croydon. I don't know if any of you know St Giles. It's a special school, and I'm sure many of you will be very familiar with the widget symbols here and the kind of image representation so that PMLD students are able to indicate yes or no, and also follow the simple instructions here. Pretty standard stuff, but of these, just think again, which do these represent? It would seem perhaps obvious that this is about engagement and representation on the left-hand side here, but on the right-hand side, a widget symbol, singular, of an astronaut, but blown up to almost, not quite life-size, maybe 2/3 life-size. Which of these is it? Engagement, representation, action and expression. Haven't got time to do proper kind of interaction here, but I think it's a bit of all three. Because I said to Lynn Castle, the teacher here, I said, Lynn, just talk me through how you use that. That's actually a mirror she's put in there. She said a lot of our students like to look at themselves, and through this very clever and creative use of a simple symbol, they themselves become the astronaut as their face appears there. Really interesting, isn't it? Because in theory, it looks like it's all engagement and representation, but if you are creative in your approach, if you validate the response from the learner, that could be action and expression. Just moving quickly on, this is a resource that isn't open access, but if you're on LJFL, and that's virtually all schools in London and an increasing number outside of London, you get Busy Things, the multi-award-winning platform as part of the LJFL service. Haven't got time to do it justice this afternoon, other than to say an extraordinary resource, totally cross-curricular, covers all aspects of EYFS, Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, all parts of the curriculum. Oops, I've just bashed the screen, sorry about that. But it's got switch accessibility built in. Is this going to play, this video? Yeah, I mean, it's just literally, that was just my video camera on a tripod at a distance. This is also at St Giles. So you wouldn't necessarily know the challenges that the child has, but she's navigating her way through the Busy Things menu system there. Nothing particularly special about that, but actually on the other angle, her hand, she has got motor control challenges with the mouse, but she's still able to navigate independently through that. But it's a fantastic platform, this, and with the partners that we work with at LJFL, a deep and profound commitment to SEND as well. They're working really hard on all the time making things more and more accessible. Sorry to move on quickly, but here's the other thing, sorry about this, just the other thing that isn't open access, but you get this if you're on LJFL, is again the multi-award winning J2E platform. I was saying to Laura earlier, we need about an hour on Busy Things, about an hour on J2E, because it's amazing all the different things that you can do. It's almost quite difficult to even describe what J2E does because it does so many things, but it's an online creative tool suite where you can do all sorts of things in terms of document creation, animation, publishing, pulling it all together. Definitely, it with a creative teacher covers all aspects of UDL, text-to-speech, speech-to-text, word banks, animation, online book creation, there we go. But, and I think this is key, really, with the role of technology in teaching and learning, or rather effective teaching and learning. It's the creativity of the teacher, it's the application of that technology that's really going to make that impact. Still at St Giles here, what is this? Not entirely obvious when you're first looking at it, but it's really, really important to that school. Every year they have their summer performance, an opportunity for every single child in that school to participate and to perform. And of course that's very difficult when it was COVID and remote learning. So they were determined to run the school performance still, and so they created a stage area here. There was a performance space. It was filmed, and then J2E was the platform which was access controlled, and they were able to publish to the parents appropriately, safely, entirely within the control of the school. So that's just one small example of J2E, but it might not be a very obvious example of an online platform, but it worked really well for that school. Conscious of the time, I'm just going to keep going quickly with this. I do keep mentioning the award-winning bit, I think it's important in terms of quality assurance here. We produce many resources ourselves at LGFL, and we're doing quite well. Look at all of those badges, and I hope you don't mind me saying that we've won an ERA award, or 3, recently, and a couple of better awards this year. Space Adventures, let's go back to that one. I thought this up and I created this myself. I'd been watching too much of Interstellar, Iron Man and The Martian and those types of films. But I had this idea about, let's have a story about going on a space adventure that goes wrong, okay? And so basically you've got this, where I filmed it, where there's an actress here and it's all a helmet headshot. That's the whole drama is filmed just through one video shot. Filmmaking students take note on the creative possibilities here. Anyway, so we commissioned an author to do this story of the mission that goes wrong, and on the bit, to be honest, when they're on the moon, didn't look so good on that one shot, so we did a bit of virtual reality there. Lots of representation and engagement going on here to meet the needs of all sorts of learners, to have a really exciting and engaging and cross-curricular computing units, literacy units, maths units, all that kind of thing. But built into it, we were very clear to put lots of advice about accessibility. So we link off to the main providers, Microsoft, Google and Apple, for all of their accessibility advice. We had easy read versions of the story, and simplified version as well, not the same thing. But we made those 2 distinctions in there, and then put a decent interface and lots of information available to support teachers on that. Moving off Space Adventures, just another example. These are all open access for you to use in your context. Ancient Egypt, I was really fortunate to be able to film. There's me filming at the Manchester Museum a few years ago with an Egyptologist. Unbelievable things that we filmed there. White glove handling, and being able to take the learner to places and see things that they just couldn't any other way. Surrounding it with the kind of advice that you've seen on Space Adventures. But this one here, about at the end, action and expression. You will all have different contexts for your learners, with different abilities and opportunities. But how often do we ask children to create videos with green screen? Do you know how to do that yourself? Would that put you off on asking your children just because you don't know how to do it? They do, I can assure you. They're doing it, many of them on TikTok most evenings, for example. So what we need to reflect on, well, okay, if the learning objective is clear, if the assessment criteria is clear, is this a valid way of doing it for some things? And we've got other resources as well on LGFL, fossils and dinosaurs. I'm back at the Manchester Museum here. We've put great attention on how we represent the information. Looks like the night at the museum there for me. And we had a bit of VR again there, but also built into fossils and dinosaurs. We've got all sorts of, it's too small for this room and the projector, sorry, but all sorts of ways of structuring and showing to teachers the different aspects of inclusion support built into that. And just to finish off with fossils and dinosaurs, we really took Immersive Reader, Microsoft Immersive Reader, and we really used that as a vehicle to show how we can take text that's within a standard teacher's learning resource and how you can really help learners engage with that text. Are you familiar with Immersive Reader? There are equivalents. It's a free open access resource. It's unbelievable. Really helps with readability. And I'm not just talking about it will read the text out loud. It will identify the different nouns or verbs in the text and highlight it with a key and all sorts of different things to make it much easier for text to be understood. We've got a series actually on LGFL that deconstructs Immersive Reader in a helpful way targeting for teachers. That's all on the included section of the website. Conscious of the time, I'm going to keep going if that's okay with everyone. Another important strand is our support for you as teachers in terms of your professional development. We've got resources that are specifically designed for teachers. We work with Richard Hurstwood. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Richard's work. got a fantastic resource that Richard did for us at LGFL. I love the way it's just so direct and accessible, the advice and guidance from Richard here. But it's also about using the technology to help teachers understand conceptually what's going on. So in terms of visual impairment, it's about the representation. It's very clever how he's showing, for example, the different types of visual impairment, that if we are fortunate enough not to suffer, we may not fully appreciate, but it's represented quite clearly, and we hope helpfully for teachers there. And just sometimes seeing ideas in a structured CPD context is helpful. So we have all of that on LGFL as well. Learning through movement is another resource. I was more involved in this one, actually. And although it's simple, you may be really expert in this field, but you'll be working with other adults that are helping the learners that may not be as experienced, and actually just helping them understand that there are these different aspects and modelling it is helpful. So I am just going to keep going here. So our online training, completely free. You don't need to be on LGFL for this. You're most welcome to attend our training. This example here is on our mental health and well-being training, where we've got a range of different topics, but also we have got inclusion training. So we're, for example, next Tuesday we're looking at literacy in relation to EdTech. Online training, where possible we record it, and then for example we call it rewind. Teachers, you're busy, you can't necessarily turn up at 2:30 on a Tuesday afternoon, so if possible we record it, and don't just say, oh, and here's the link for you to re-watch. Really? Well, if you didn't have time to turn up, you probably haven't got time to spend an hour looking through a whole video and hoping there's something that's relevant. How about if it listed exactly what was in the video, and if you like the sound of a particular question, you click it and it goes to that point. Bit DVD special features style, we call that rewind. That we try and do that as much as possible. And the final point on this, community sharing and support. We do a lot of work where we're in schools and we're working with the schools, and the schools themselves help produce the resources. I'm really, really proud of the work that we've done with Child Bereavement UK. This was the ERA award that we won a couple of weeks ago, Child Bereavement Toolkit here. And what I've learned very, very early on in that partnership is that educational institutions, like many institutions, you are dealing with, sorry to say it everyone, but death within those communities almost all the time. And if you're in the senior leadership in schools and not even in the senior leadership, it's a very, very challenging area. So how about this as a resource? Managing a sudden death in a school community. You click on that resource, the first page says what to do in the first 30 minutes. Because think about that. Where's your head going to be if you've got a death of a member of staff or a child, totally unexpected, at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning? And then we've got other resources supporting a bereaved pupil, and the most recent one, having honest conversations about death and grief. We need to do it with young people. And the case studies that are in here, unbelievable, the findings in one of the case study. The Year 5 teacher said, my children are happier now that we've studied and talked about death. Not what you would expect, but have a look at that case study because it's very, very clear. And there it is. I'm just going to push on here. We've seen one robot head this afternoon. This is a different kind of robot head. The robot heads we saw earlier were in classrooms. We chucked one up into space. Well, we tried. This is the Obot, and we did a whole project with another robot called the Pico, and we had that in 4 of our schools and said to the schools, what do you make of this? How can you use it? This is a special school. This, I again did not predict they would use it in this way.
What I found really interesting, and I hope is a transferable skill that we can apply to other areas of the curriculum, is that these children that weren't able really to express themselves verbally, or perhaps on a wall display publicly, which they would often do in the morning with their class teacher, were able to do it with Pico.
Do you think how many times you've done?